Okay, what I'm going to tell you about natural edge bowl turning is how I do it. It's not necessarily the only way you can approach it. There are several ways you can approach it, although the two ways that I'm going to show you are basically the ways that almost all of you will have to. One is going down through the bark. In other words, you're turning down through the bark, and you can see by the little holes that are on each side exactly where the center was of the limb that I was using. The other way is down the end, leaving an edge, not going all the way to the edge. And you can see by the little hole in the bottom that I went down through the center. And then those of you who won these, I'm going to set them over here so I hopefully won't knock them over. And so your blanks are basically these kind. This is what your blank looks like. This is the same piece of wood out of which these were turned. I had enough that I could do. I was sure I had enough that I could do for now. Unfortunately, we didn't meet last week, and this is starting to dry out. It was pretty wet when I did it. When I realized what was going to happen, I wrapped it in paper and taped it up good. Wrapped them in brown paper, but I can tell they have dried out. They have dried out pretty good. You mount these different ways. Since this one is the most fun, this is the one I'm going to actually demonstrate first. And if we run out of time, then it's very easy for you to see how this one is done. This was mounted on a screw chuck so that I could get at the back edge. And therefore, musical accompaniment, I love it. And hold it in the chuck. This one you have to turn a foot on it. So the way I mount this is I use the chuck that I'm going to use, and I use a step center that is made to fit in a chuck. I'm sure some of you have these. The nice thing about them is you don't have to knock a Morris taper. They make these on a Morris taper also. You don't have to knock the Morris taper out. You could just take this out of the chuck and then go right on about your business of putting and it'll fit right flat on there. You turn it down. If I was Jimmy Clues, I'd say you nip it up a little, and you're ready to go.
Hey, I have a question, please.
Yes.
You were saying about your wood is drying out. Couldn't you put that in a plastic bag? Then it would be.
Well, it may be, but what I didn't want to get in here this evening and find cracks in it was what I was concerned about. That's why I wrapped it in paper so that some of the moisture could come out. Now, when you're preparing your log, and I'm going to call it a log because this is basically what you use for this style of natural edge turning, you have to have a way to hold it. And that is where my two index fingers are. Now, the trick is to get this as nearly in the center of the piece, both this way and this way as you can. And then do the same thing on the other side. What happens if you don't do that? It's not the end of the world. But what happens is your one side will be thicker than the other if you don't get it right dead on. This one I was pretty lucky with. And I turned these just to see if I could still do this before when I was asked to do the demo. So I got it pretty good. The sides are the thickness of the wall at the rim, at the natural edge, are pretty much the same. No guarantee that this is going to be the same thing. Another thing is, you have bark on here that you may want to keep on here. There are two things you have to remember. The bark will dry out before the wood dries out. and it will want to come off. And so what I do is before I turn it, when I get it down to this point that just this is exposed, I run a bead of super glue both inside and out. Learned that from Jim Mills, sitting in the back against the garage door. I could never, this was years ago, I didn't understand why the bark would come off, 3 months after I turned the piece. Jim says, well, there's a way you can solve that, and that's what I've done ever since. Another thing is, this bark is sharp, and it will cut you. It will cut spouses, it will cut grandchildren, it will cut pets. So I never leave any sharp edges on here. You can, but the way I don't, I'm uncomfortable with that. Therefore, I smooth the bark out a little. Now, when you turn this one and you turn down through, you still put the super glue on. You see it's there. I've already put it on this one. This approach is not going to leave you with as much of your edge. The edge is going to be smoother. It's still a natural edge, but it doesn't have the rough texture. It doesn't have as much of the bark on. However, this little bit of bark here is still bark, and it will dry out ahead of this, and it will come off. And so a little bit of super glue on there is a good thing. Okay, let's crack on. You can tell I went to Jimmy Clue's demonstration, can't you? I had this on here before, so I know it's running reasonably true. Shouldn't have put that WD-40 on there, Bill. I think it'll be all right. Okay, now we're gonna, well, before we do that, I customarily wear safety glasses and a face shield, simply because I don't always have the face shield on, and sometimes I'll turn the face shield up and forget to turn it back down, and you only get 2 eyes, so it's a good idea to protect them. And for the money, DeWalt makes the best safety glasses that you can buy as far as comfort goes and as far as scratch resistance goes. And they're I think they're $9.95 now at Lowe's. And I usually buy 2 at a time. Once they get scratched up, I throw them away and they're done for. Okay, we're going to need a tool to turn with. Since I want to turn fast, I'm going to use a 5/8 inch bowl gouge. Now you say, oh, you're turning around the edge with a bowl gouge. Well, yeah, I am. I even turn this, which is long grain, side grain with a bowl gouge, because the truth of the matter is this doesn't know it's a bowl gouge. And you can do spindle turning work with them. Not as fine, perhaps. Okay, let's see if we can make this thing work. That might be a hair fast. You gonna stay there? Uh-oh. Is that all the further that's going to go down? I'm going to have to use the other tool rest, even though I don't want to. No, we're not going to hacksaw that. We're not going to hacksaw that. By golly, I can barely get that down far enough. That's pretty good. Okay, here we go. I hold it at 3 places. I hold it here, here, and against my body. I don't hold it like this. You don't write like that with a pencil, so you have better control the closer you can be to it. That dried out a lot. Yeah, we have a ways to go.
You're pretty close, or maybe it's 3 inches. I'm still going. But you're just sliding the tailstock back, aren't you? Probably. At least to keep it snowed.
Now here's something you can see right offhand. I do not have it in the center. I'm through the bark over there. And bark plays heck with your tools, incidentally. So, you know, I just brought extra tools rather than stopping to sharpen them. So I was not truly in the center. But we're gonna move on here. I should have moved that in a little. Never move the quill while the piece is turning. I do it, but you should never do it. None of us should. I think the lathe is fine. I think it was a dumb turner. Tell you the truth. Getting a little greedy here. Just about. Notice I'm tapering it a little now. Foot will be at this end, at the tailstock end. Okay. It's not too bad. That's plenty of tool rest for this little piece of work. I think we'll be okay now, John. Full cut. I like it much better than push cut, personally. No, that'll go on with plenty to spare. This is just a wide parting tool that I have ground on an angle. It's tapered this way. The chuck jaws are tapered the same way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make the foot here with a little bit of taper on it so that it'll go in the chuck jaws. Okay, we'll work on that a little later. Now we're going to shape the outside. And this is your choice, whatever kind of shape you like. I'm doing a simple one for the sake of time. Now something to notice, I left a little ledge here. The chuck jaws are going to butt against that. That's going to give me the whole bulk of the piece for support, and it won't just be squeezing on this. And then ultimately, this foot will come off. If you notice, I don't let the foot on the bottom. I take it off. That's a little bit of a maneuver in itself, and we're not going to do that here tonight. But you can know you have to jam it. You have to jam it, and just very carefully take it off. Okay, how close to the edge are we? Well, we're pretty well there, aren't we? Yep, we're pretty well there. We might not be too bad. Okay, I had to clean this up just a little bit back here, because that's a little heavy. Do you have any old Craftsman turning tools, anyone? Throw them all away except the parting tool. And if the parting tool says high-speed steel, keep it, because they're fantastic. I can't get any of the rest of them to stay sharp. Now, there's a couple things you can do here. You can go ahead and take that nubbin off. If there's room in your chuck for it to go in there, there's nothing wrong with just letting it on. Because what you need to know is where dead center is here in the back when you come to take the foot off. If you're going to take the foot off. If you're going to let it like this, which is fine, then you don't have to worry about that. Now we got to undo this thing, John. Oh man, there we go. It was stuck on there, wasn't it?
Pretty well.
Now, do we have a Tommy bar to get this thing out with? To get the
Should be in the tray underneath.
Okay. Okay. Doggone if I see. Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is what I think we're looking for. Will that go in there? Yeah, it does. Very good. Attaboy. Hope I didn't make that too small. I don't think I did. I think it's just about right. Now, if I were turning this to make a finished piece, I would have cleaned this outside edge up some before I turned it around. But you all know how to do that anyway, or at least I think you do. Now at this point you want to get this right tight. Customarily, I would put a little super glue on that foot, because the foot's going to come off. I'm going to take it off when I'm done. So I would customarily have put a little super glue on there to strengthen this foot a little. This wood is still fairly wet, as you can see from the shavings that are coming off. But I think we're okay. I'm reaching for a wheel out there. There isn't one. That's John. That's yours. Always, if you're going to leave the tailstock on the lathe, take the center out. Okay? Okay. Do you have to use that bar to get it out? Yeah. It's really a good idea, because that point's right sharp. And you're working away here, and even though this is far enough back, it's real easy to put your elbow into that. And that really ruin your whole day. It really will. Now what we have to do is we have to hollow this out, and we have to let that bark on the edge. Now it'll stay on there although this has not been super glued. So I can't guarantee you it will stay on. I think it will because the wood is pretty green. But basically, we're going to go down in here and we're going to get this nice and thin. And we're going to get it nice and smooth on the inside. Or as nice and smooth as we can. Because this isn't hard to sand. In here, that's a whole different matter. And if you come back for the October show, I'll show you how to do that, how I do it in there. And so we try to use tools that will get that as smooth as we can. Here was the problem, right there was the problem. That stem center slipped. And I didn't have any trouble with that at home, but...
The other one was slipping too.
Huh?
The other one was slipping too.
Yeah, it was just generally a mess. Not too close. Now we're going to take this down in steps. We're not going to try to clean it all out and then get our edges and our thickness to where we want it. We're going to do it in steps because this bulk back here gives support to the front so that this will eventually get rather thin. In fact, sometimes it gets too thin. I've had that happen. And of course, it quite obviously is not too thin yet, but we're going to get it a lot thinner. You just have to have enough room that you can work. All right, I'm pushing the gouge in and I'm just cutting with this little corner, right just off of center, going down along the side. Now, it is now to the point that I'm laying the tool over too much. In other words, in order to get down in there, I'm having to lay the tool over like this. So we have to go to another tool. And for this, we will use a very shallow ground. Very shallow ground. In fact, you can even do finer work if you put a micro bevel on here. Grind one bevel here, and then grind a second bevel here. And you work on the front bevel is the one you work on. And this will go right down along the side there, hopefully, and you can get it really nice and thin. Well, it's still not real thin. We could go quite a bit yet. But you got the idea. You know what I'm doing. So I switched to a little 3/8 bowl gouge because I don't have that tool sharpened. I don't have the bevel on that quite right. Now, it isn't right here. I have a problem, which I don't have over here. Why is that?
Because you were off center.
I was off, exactly, because I was off center. So there's a couple of ways you can deal with that. You can deal with it with a scraper, a little side scraper, and what you have to be careful of is that you don't get too far here. This is a little heavier than this, and if you're not careful, you'll go out through the side. Another way you can deal with it is sandpaper. Remember, sandpaper is a turning tool. You'll hear me say that again in the future. But I could clean that up a little bit by just simply shear scraping. Now, what do I mean by shear scraping? Most of you know, but I'm only cutting with this wing of the tool. I'm not cutting with both of them. I'm only cutting with the bottom wing, the wing that's down. And you can get it really nice and smooth. You can hear when it's getting thin. See the little fine stuff that I'm taking off? Almost as good as sanding. Okay, we have it pretty good. We have it pretty good. Now, what you do is what I just did the whole way down. And I'll go a little bit further, and then we'll switch to the other piece. Maybe we'll switch to the other piece. I'll go a little bit further. And, well, the evening's young. I know a lot of you have traveling to do. I don't want to keep you here too long. Because I haven't quite cleared this part of the bark yet. So I'm going to go down a little further so I can clear this part of the bark, and then it's just a matter of going on down to the bottom. And down here you have to take some care because it's going to get narrow down here, and you have to take some care going across the bottom. Although they do make wonderful funnels if you go too far. Incidentally, always keep your hand behind that tool rest. Don't be doing stuff like this or stuff like this, which some turners will hold that. Not with a natural edge, because if that edge hits you, it's going to cut you. Guaranteed, 100% of the time, you can take it to the bank. So,
Hospital, I think.
huh?
I think to the hospital.
Yeah, and from there to the hospital, you're right.
Back with the bank.
Too far over the tool rest. I would normally be using a smaller tool rest and would have the tool rest angled down into the piece so that I don't have so much of the tool hanging over it. That's what that squealing you hear is. Well, it could be thinner, but it's fairly thin. And we're now past the bark on both sides, so you can see what the finished product is going to be like. And all you do is just continue to do what I've been doing, and you go all the way down to the bottom. Now, when you get down to the bottom, of course, there's always the issue of going across the bottom and getting it flat, or getting the shape that you want, hopefully contoured somewhat like the outside shape. And there's a couple of ways you can approach that. You can come down the side, cleaning up the sides the way I did. But when you get down to the bottom, you turn the tool over, you ride this bevel of your bowl gouge and go right into the center. The other way to do that is to use the small with more bevel down here, and so that there's very little bevel to ride, and you can go across the bottom straight across like that. You might have to turn into it a little bit, but you can go almost straight across like that. Now, the place you want to leave yourself the least amount of sanding, if possible, is right down here on the inside, because that's the place where it is the hardest to sand. And no matter, I don't care how good you are, you will have to do some sanding if you're going to have a truly finished piece. If you look at these pieces, I'm not bragging, but they're finished all the way down to the bottom carefully. That's the next story. Any questions about this approach? Is that enough? Do I need to go ahead and finish it, or you know what I'm doing? Okay. Chucky.
What kind of finish did you use when I was in
That is sanding sealer, my own brand, and teak oil. That is teak oil, and then it's waxed with microcrystalline wax on the outside. I would not use microcrystalline wax if you were going to put food stuff in it. Microcrystalline wax, I don't believe, is considered food safe, but it's wonderful wax. Beg pardon? Sure. Somebody can take it home and finish it if they would like to. I'm not going to take it home.
There you go.
They put 2 tightening slots on your chucks. Sometimes they put 4. However many they put, use them all. Use them all so that you're drawing down even on it. Now I finished it up this far, so we'll have to do a little both outside and a little inside to get somewhere close to that point. That's not going to turn too bad. How fast did we have this thing going? It's probably pretty good. When I changed the blade, I would have customarily gone to the grinder and sharpened. That tool was dull. This one will be dull very soon. Now at home, I would use a negative rake scraper on that. Excuse me, to get it cleaned up pretty good. I don't have a negative rake scraper. I didn't bring one, so you all know how that works anyway. Now from this point on, basically we do the same thing we did with the other one. The only thing is now we're going down through end grain. Before we were going down through side grain. And this is not right here, but I'm not going to take time to change that now. We'll do a little of this. See that? I'll show you how to stop that. Well, you can stop it, of course, by approaching the wood the right way. That is in, and then lay the tool over and go down through there. Or you can use a parting tool to establish your wall thickness right from day one if you want to. Now that I've done that, the tool won't kick back because I have a little edge here. I don't have much of one because there's nothing but bark there. But most of this bark's going to go away anyway. And what you're going to wind up with when you're done is the shadow of the bark on the side. Because basically this one is turned the way this one is being turned. We'll go down a little ways. Then if you have any questions or anything, I'll try to deal with them if I can. Well, when I put this hole in for the screw chuck, I didn't have it dead in the center. And you want to get it as dead in the center as you can. In spite of that, you will have some unevenness up here. Because when I brought this out from the when I turned it up from the outside, I was very careful in the bark area because I want to keep that bark on there, as much of it as will stay on. Here we are very thin. Till that gets sanded out, there's nothing left. Over here, on the other hand, we are thick. Can we even them up? No way. Because the more you take off of here, quite obviously, the more you're going to take off of these thin areas, where here it is already very thin. Now, with this, you do exactly the same thing. You just go all the way down to the bottom, step at a time. Don't take too much. I usually take an inch, inch and a half at a time. And then clean up the sides, get them the thickness that you want them, get them as thin as you can, and then go on. Because this bulk here supports the work. And so when you're working in here and you have wood in here, you have a lot of support. It's keeping it from flexing so much. If you take it all the way down, take the center all the way out, and then work out toward the edges, which is customary to do. If I'm doing a bowl and I have plenty of wood, and I'm not concerned about thickness because I usually turn my bowls around 5 millimeters. This is considerably less than 5 millimeters right here. Then I sometimes do work my way out. But even with bowls, I most always do it this way. Take it down slowly. Questions? Do you understand? Do I need to go further? Everybody feel they learned a little something? Then it was worth coming down here. If you learned a little something, maybe not a whole lot. Okay.